It's Tuesday. It's May the 11th. It's the Maine Take. Hi and welcome. My name is Dana Connors. I'm with the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and we are pleased to bring you this weekly program. I do, however, this week have a friend of mine who is going to sit in as co-host. I'm pleased to welcome John Williams. John is a CEO for the Oxford Hills Regional Chamber of Commerce, and he has a number of programs, podcasts, if you will, that would be too many to name. It would take our entire show, but there's one that I do with him every other week, the second and the fourth Thursdays of each month. This week, we're featuring the success story of Saddleback Mountain. But today, I welcome John. Thanks, John, to be with us, and look forward to your participation.
Dana, it's always a pleasure, and thank you very much for asking me today. I really appreciate it. I look forward to talking about the issues and being with the advocacy team. That's exciting.
And we welcome you aboard. You can tell by his smooth voice that why he has so many podcasts, because people love to listen to him. He's a real competitor when you're on the show with him, however. This week, as you know, our program really focuses on issues that have an impact on Maine's economy and the people behind those issues. Well, today it's really about issues for sure, because our focus today that John and I will be exploring with our guests have everything to do with the special session of the 130th legislature. I say special session because, believe it or not, the regular session adjourned in late March, and from April the 28th on, we've been in special session. But that hasn't stopped the issues. There are many, and most are of extreme importance to our business community, to our employer community, to our employees. And we're here today to share some of that with you and to express the impact that they may have on you, your lives, and your livelihood. So let me tell you who our guests are. Normally, I have our three advocacy team members on at the end of our program. Today, they are on for a good part of the entire show. Also, we have on in our second segment, Peter DelGreco. Peter is the CEO of Maine Company. Maine Company was created in 1995. Its purpose was to work with the DECD, Department of Economic and Community Development, to attract business to our state. He is the third CEO and an excellent CEO at that, who's had considerable success. I'm anxious to have him on the program today so that he can give his reaction to some of the issues that we are about to share with you by way of our advocacy team. So John, you and I are pleased to welcome the Chamber's advocacy team, Peter Gore, Ben Gilman, Linda Caprera, and I'm going to turn the program over to you, except for a few questions along the way that John and I may have, and ask you in the next 15 minutes or so to share with us some of the issues that are on your plate that you're concerned about in terms of how they may affect our economy. So Peter, why don't you kick it off?
Okay, Dana, well, thank you. And John, welcome. Nice to see you again. We are in theoretically the last 4 to 5 weeks of the legislative session, even though it's a special session. And committee work is theoretically winding down, although I'm told today that while committees have voted on, all committees have voted on 59%, so less than 60% of the bills that they were assigned, only 19% of total bills in the possession of the committee have actually been voted out of committee. So in the next 4 to 5 weeks, there's a lot of work that remains to be done and a lot of significant issues before the legislature to deal with. So I'll start. In the Labor Committee, they have had a number of public work sessions and still public hearings, and there are public hearings scheduled for next week, even though they're supposed to be done with committee work on Friday, on a number of bills that we've been tracking that will impact the cost of doing business here in Maine. 2 of them have been carried over until next year, LD 225, the bill that deals with the cash out of vacation time, and LD 607, which would change the overtime standard threshold in Maine. Both of those will be dealt with in 2022. Two other issues have come to the forefront in the last week. One deals with unemployment insurance. The administration and Speaker Ryan Fecteau both have bills in dealing with unemployment insurance and some of the problems that were associated with the system, and that became sort of more apparent during the pandemic and the stress that was put on our unemployment insurance system. As you all know, the governor has already infused the trust fund with $300 million from the CARES Act monies, and she's earmarked another $80 million and is proposing to put that again into the trust fund. And that's just to maintain current benefit levels. Where that had not happened, there would have been a tax increase on employers in the tens of millions of dollars to keep the fund solvent. The Speaker's bill adds a number of different twists and benefit increases to the unemployment insurance system, and it also shifts sort of the paradigm of what unemployment insurance is supposed to be. It's always been designed to be a bridge between employment, between jobs, but this would change the direction and the benefit eligibility of the system by allowing things like a loss of childcare or a loss of transportation, rather than a loss of job, to qualify somebody for unemployment insurance. That's a big change, and it will be an expensive one. In addition, he's also proposing establishing a navigator program that would fund certain groups with grants to help employees through the system, and it's funded by a $3 million tax on employers. We're strongly opposed to the Speaker's bill, and we have had conversations with folks in the administration and on the Labor Committee. They are scheduled to work the bill tomorrow. We'll see whether that happens. The other big issue on Friday, the Labor Committee voted out with the Democrats and one independent supporting a bill that would end employment at will in Maine, LD 553. Instead, we'd move to a disciplinary, three-step disciplinary for-cause discharge or discipline standard. We'd be only one of two states in the country to do this. Montana's the other. Every single discipline or discharge would be litigated, and employers could be held to penalties and unlimited recovery by the employee if it's done improperly. This is a bad idea. It will increase the cost of doing business here in Maine dramatically. Everything will be litigious. The governor's 10-year economic development plan will stall because businesses have 48 other states that they can choose to locate in and not deal with for-cause termination, which is a very big deal. We are strongly opposed to this, and we're reaching out to businesses. We hope folks will contact their locally elected official and urge them to strongly oppose LD 553. So those are my major issues. Ben, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Peter. Sorry about that. I took a minute to unmute. I feel like you could have picked Linda or myself. I feel like I'm in the old game show Hollywood Squares
I can go if you want.
on bad legislation. You could pick either of us, and I think we're going to have a similar story coming from our square in terms of the negative impact of bad legislation on Maine's business community. And some of them sound good in the environmental field. You'll hear, about LD 1541 dealing with recycling and, landfills in the state of Maine. But really what LD 1541 does is it assesses a fee on all packaging here in the state of Maine. And what does that truly mean? It funds a whole new government entity outside of the Department of Environmental Protection through a fee on everything you purchase with packaging, if you think about that. So when you go to the grocery store and you fill up your grocery cart, everything you purchase at that time as packaging will have a fee. New York considered similar legislation, and they studied it and they looked, and it said basically that a family of four, their grocery bill will increase from 4% to 6%. That's a significant increase on families and businesses here in the state of Maine when you look at that. We all know we have to deal with recycling. It's a changing world, recycling and solid waste here in the state of Maine. But is this fee on at the wholesale level that's going to trickle down to the consumer the solution? We don't think it is. You could also look at, there's a bill LD 1532 dealing with emissions, industrial emissions licenses. There are 660 entities in the state of Maine that receive emissions license from the state of Maine. A lot of the employers that you can think of, but also schools, universities, and hospitals have emissions license. There's a bill to replace our entire emissions infrastructure that the department does a really good job of implementing and replacing it with an overly burdensome new regulatory environment that would require someone, say, that has an emissions license, a hospital in Portland, for example, to notify every time they get their emissions license people within a mile. They would have to notify 177,000 individuals every time their emissions license. It also changes their time frame to change every 2 years. They have to reapply. We have a really good environmental regulatory structure here in the state of Maine. The department does a really good job implementing it. And the question is, why are we proposing such onerous new regulations when they're not needed? And there is no evidence that will actually provide better environmental results. And then you go over to the renewable energy industry, which is really blossoming here in the state of Maine. A lot of good opportunities, whether it be offshore wind or anything. And then comes along LD 1231. LD 1231 takes the renewable energy industry and turns it on its head by requiring a project labor agreement for all renewable energy here in the state of Maine. What does that do? Well, it basically says that only union contractors can work on the development of renewable energy here in the state of Maine. 94% of the contractors here in Maine are not unionized. So where will that workforce come from? And where will those contracts go? So there's a lot of bills that may sound good at first, but really when you drill down, it's going to increase the cost of development of those projects, increase the cost of your grocery bill. And if you're an industrial manufacturer, increase the cost. If you have an overly burdensome regulation that you have to notify everyone from within a mile, that's going to increase your cost of doing business here in the state of Maine. And those are just a couple. They sound like good at first, but when you dig down, they really have a negative impact on the business community. And we're not even talking about taxes yet, which we can see directly the cost on that. So I'm going to choose the next Hollywood Square, and that's going to be Linda. And, Linda, what do you have for bad legislation?
Well, there is an enormous amount of bills on the taxation committee's plate still that will increase taxes on Mainers and Maine businesses. It's very troubling, folks. One of which they just passed out this morning, LD 1342. This would allow a municipality to impose a local option sales tax on prepared foods and lodging if approved by the voters of up to 1%. This is hugely troubling. This industry has already suffered under the pandemic. The revenues in the tourism industry has already down over 40%. And now they're going to hit them with a tax. It just doesn't make sense. It's crazy. And that passed out of the taxation committee by majority vote, party lines. Democrats voted for it, Republicans did not. It's very troubling. Again, we're in a pandemic, and this industry has been hit hugely. We also have a number of bills, over 9 bills, that deal with increasing taxes on high earners in the state. The thresholds vary, but they really begin at 100,000 for single, 150,000 for heads of household, and 200,000 for married filing jointly. The rates vary from 7.95 all the way up to 13.15, one of the highest in the nation. Those bills have not been worked on. They're going to work these in the next few weeks. There's a bill to impose a tax on Mainers who are on second homeowners in the state. 3 out of 4 homeowners in the state that own second homes are Mainers. This would impose a 0.5% tax on the assessed value, which would be if the home has been vacant for less than 180 days, or if it's uninhabitable for at least 3 months. Mainers go to their camps maybe sometimes a week out of the whole year. They can't get to them. This is going to affect Mainers. You've got a bill to basically take away tax incentives for employers that are found if the workplace is under a violation under the state's labor laws, some of which could be completely out of the control of an employer. You would basically strip them of all their tax incentives. Doesn't make sense. It's a huge threat to investment here and to jobs that are currently at those facilities. There's a bill to basically tax anyone that has over $5 million of assets, their cash, their CDs, their pensions. This bill is really very troubling. This bill is going to be up for public hearing this week. That's another bill. There's just the litany. There's a bill on that would basically tax water, 5 cents per gallon of water, groundwater that's extracted for commercial bottling purposes. You know, these bills threaten the economy here in the state. They threaten our jobs. You know, it's crazy.
So John, it's your opportunity to follow up on that, if you're not totally depressed.
I just, in listening to Peter, Ben, and Linda, it's obvious that one of the things that troubles me as a regional chamber of commerce director is the fact that it doesn't appear to me, that the legislature is really understanding the issues associated with small businesses in the state. I deal with it on a daily basis. We have 350 businesses that we represent in the Oxford Hills area, and 95 to 96% of those businesses have less than 20 employees. And the fact is that when you start talking about these, the local option sales tax, for example, Linda, you were talking about that a moment ago, when it comes to hospitality and restaurants and that type of thing. And we are in the heart of, an area of the state where that's huge. And subsequently, it's going to have a significant effect on these businesses' ability to continue to function. And when it comes to hiring, it gets right down to everything. They're having trouble enough hiring people right now, and that's a whole other subject that I could get into, but I'm not going to. And now you're going to raise taxes. That's going to have even more of a devastating effect on not only the businesses, but probably on the economy in general, in an area like the one that I represent. So it's very, very troubling. And getting back to what you said, Peter, about employment at will, it just makes absolutely no sense. And I've talked to businesses on a number of occasions about this, going back a couple of months when it was starting to be being brought to the surface, and to a single business person, they have all said to me, that will impact our business to the point where we'll have to take a look at how we hire, who we hire, and how we continue to function as a business moving forward at every level. So,
hey, John.
I mean, we're hearing that restaurants are struggling to hire workers, and some are increasing hugely. How are they going to manage that and have this imposed on them, added tax?
I mean, they're devastated to begin with. And of course, that continues to be an issue heading into the summer. And by elevating what it is that they have to pay out to be, simply put forward, it's unfathomable to me that the legislature would even consider something like this. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and the income tax bills alone. I mean, those are all going to affect small businesses. They're pass-through entities, which 75 to 80% of the businesses in the state of Maine are small businesses. So that's going to impact them, and their hard work and their it punishes success. I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap this segment up by saying that, John, you should know that when I asked them to give me issues that were of importance, priority issues, for our consideration and for purposes of sharing with the public, we only touched the surface of them today. There were like 42 that were highlighted, and every single one of them, while we captured some of them today, there were many more. And that's kind of indicative of what is being considered here, with the obvious realization that we do not have the access that we are accustomed to. So I think it was Peter who said that, I repeat, this is a time for each and every one who may be listening to this or read our publications or are aware of what the issues are, to be sure and do not take results for granted. Reach out to your local legislator and make them aware of your concerns. I can't say it, I can't stress it enough, the importance of doing just that. So I want to thank our three advocacy teams. John, I want you to stay with me because I want to welcome Peter DelGreco. Peter has the responsibility of trying to say to business, don't worry about this. We want you here anyway. So Peter, welcome. I've introduced you before, but you're exceptionally good at what you do, and you've been at Maine Company for some time now, and you've had considerable success. What's your reaction to what you've heard here today in terms of your responsibilities and the likelihood of success or the unlikelihood of what that means for success?
Well, Dana, thank you for inviting me. John, it's good to speak with you. I will say that as Linda, Ben, and Peter were kind of going through their list, I was watching you, John, a lot, shaking your head. It was an interesting litany of issues that they went through, and they are very challenging times. The one thing that really struck me, Dana, and I'm not sure if this is the road we want to go down, but the first thing though that struck me is, and I think you told me this, there were 2,300 bills that were introduced, or something like maybe it was 1,800, into a brand new legislature during a pandemic at a time when the people representing organizations don't have access to these folks. It also is a time when there are a lot of new legislators who probably don't have the ability or experience in the past to comprehend some of these changes or radical changes that you probably don't want to implement during a fragile recovery coming off of a pandemic. I know that the one thing that I've heard in the past is that a lot of our new legislators don't really have a lot of training or introduction. One thing they used to do was something called the Policy Leaders Academy through the Maine Development Foundation, where they do this big bus tour through Maine and they meet all sorts of constituents and businesses. That obviously can't happen during a pandemic. So we've got a ton of bills with really aggressive changes to the normal way of doing business with an inexperienced group during an incredibly fragile time. And that's those are scary combinations to have.
Yeah, you remind me of something when you were speaking of the process, the experience, and the overall culture of a legislature. And that is, it's one thing to put in place these measures, these policy issues, the legislation that's before us, and certainly not all of them pass, or at least we're hoping and begging they don't. But at the same time, and I'm sure you must deal with this, and I'd love your response, is that we don't live in a bubble, and all of this information around things that are being proposed carries with it a message to investors who may be looking at our state. That can't be an encouraging sign, because sometimes the message can be as damaging as the measure itself when you're trying to attract people to the state. Do you find that to be the case?
I actually think it's even deeper than that, Dana. And we at Maine Company, in addition to dealing with the executive teams of businesses, we deal with consultants who advise businesses. It's kind of a cottage industry of consultants called site location consultants, and they will they track legislation on a state-by-state basis. So you've got influential people who are advising companies on their investment decisions who will shoot me emails being like, is Maine really going to do this? Is this really going to happen? And when companies are looking at their investment choices and where to go, and asking these people for their thoughts, there would be, now fortunately, we've been successful in developing great relationships with these people, and I can try to talk them off the ledge a little bit, but we can say, let's see how it plays out. But for those ones where we might not know who the consultants are, that puts us into a different tier of possibly being considered for a new business expansion. Additionally, the other thing I'd like to mention is other states are calling our existing companies. Just in the last 2 weeks, I know of 2 companies who have told me they've been called by other states, 2 manufacturers, to say, hey, we're not sure what's going on there, but if you want, if it gets too bad, come, move your business out of Maine to our state. And so we're spending a lot more time maybe over the last few months trying to talk to those companies to say, hey, no, Maine is still the place you want to invest. Let's see how this shakes out. But that's really been a shocking and disheartening result of some of these ideas.
Yeah. John, your reaction. Anything you want to ask of Peter?
Yeah, I think, it's very succinct what you're saying, Peter, because, for example, I'll use the area that I represent again, the Oxford Hills. We've had a number of businesses making inquiries about coming to the Oxford Hills. I've been dealing with real estate realtors and looking for land and that type of thing. But one of the things that's happening is that when they start, when these businesses start looking into different municipalities, they're asking the question, what about the legislature in the state of Maine? What is it that they're doing to encourage business as opposed to discourage business? And it's as simple as that. They want to know. And so subsequently, what we have to do is do our very best to try to talk to them, or at least, sometimes it's a second and third person, where we're giving information to municipalities and talking with them about what it is that we're trying to do to continue to encourage business not only to come to Maine, but to work with the legislature, which has been difficult to do because we haven't been able to get the face-to-face working relationship that we would like to have with them. And not only with businesses coming into the state, but our existing businesses in the Oxford Hills that are frustrated because they can't connect with the legislature the way they have in the past. And so they're coming to us as a Chamber of Commerce and asking us if we can bridge that gap. And even at that, it's difficult for us to do it at this particular level. And based on what you were talking about a moment ago, Dana and Peter, when it comes to the legislature in general, these new legislators who really haven't had the experience of dealing with face-to-face these businesses on a regular basis, it's tough all the way around.
And I think that's a great point, John, if I may, Dana.
Yeah, please.
We are trying to emerge from an economic shutdown due to a pandemic. Just before the pandemic hit, the governor, I heard you mention this in your previous section, the governor released her 10-year economic development strategy. Then we had the economic recovery strategy to help us emerge from this. Merge that with the climate action plan. And there are a lot of things that are happening. These plans and these goals and the idea of employing people in Maine doesn't happen if we're not encouraging businesses rather than discouraging businesses. Exactly what you said, John. I do think my ray of hope is, we've, as Dana, as you know, I was fortunate and honored enough to be asked by, at the time, Governor-elect Mills to serve on her transition team. And as we were helping her kind of put together her cabinet, we saw a lot of great and talented people. And I think we've got a governor in a team that is understanding of some of these issues and will hopefully stand up and recognize the risks that are out there. What I think it was Peter said in the previous section about her idea of just taking the unemployment insurance system and putting some of the CARES Act money in there to save businesses from a big tax increase down the road shows that there is hopefully that type of forward-looking thought that can help with some of these ideas that may not be advisory at this, especially at this point in time, trying to come out of a pandemic and an economic shutdown.
No, I think we all agree that the governor has taken this issue and the unprecedented pandemic that we've just experienced with an eye on doing what's right for the people, but also for the economy. So in our communications with her, she has been pretty steadfast in recognizing that. So we put a lot of hope and expectation in that very point. Was there, we got a couple minutes, but was there an issue that you heard in the previous segment, Peter, that might have stood out to you as being bigger, larger, more problematic in terms of your responsibilities?
The one thing that the soundbite that stayed with me was I think it was Linda who laid out just all of the tax increases that are being proposed. And during an economic recovery, that's the last thing you want to be doing. So all of the issues are incredibly important. But I think there were 15 tax bills, tax increase bills, I think was the number that I read or something like that, that are currently being discussed. Obviously, employment at will represents a a dramatic, fundamental shift in how every business has to operate. And again, I just can't see the wisdom in trying to do something like that at an incredibly fragile time of our economic recovery. And the one thing that everyone kept saying was it just doesn't have any common sense to it, especially at this point in time. It's crazy.
No, I think you wrapped it up well, and I wish we had more time to talk about it because of the importance that all of this has on the people of Maine, the businesses of Maine, and our state's economy. So I thank you. The show today has been a strong one in terms of your participation, but also having the advocacy team on from the chamber to share with John and I and our listening and viewing audience what they should know about what's at play in this session of the legislature. So I thank you, and I thank our advocacy team. And John, believe it or not, I think it's time to wrap it up. And here what we do in terms of wrapping up is the takeaway. And for me, the purpose is to kind of summarize what we might have heard here today and maybe add a little bit to it, if I can think of something to add to it. But I guess in today's takeaway, for me at least, the one word that stands out is concern. You know, I can't help but go back a year when the governor was and the state was faced with the pandemic. And she reminded us of our responsibility, our commitment to one another. We even at the state chamber, along with local regional chambers, put out a public service ad that says, "This is me counting on you." Once again, putting before people that there is a relationship that we each have to one another, and that responsibility is pretty deep in Maine and pretty wide in terms of its impact. Well, to that point, she always reminded us a healthy economy requires healthy people. Well, all of that reminds me a bit of what was discussed here today, because when I think of it, I think of another very important relationship, particularly as you think of the challenges that were spoken about and the impacts that each would have. That relationship is a relationship between the employer, the employee, and the economy. The dependency that each has on the other. To be employer to be successful depends as an employee. Employee to do well has to have a healthy business. And certainly what's going on in the economy in terms of policy and other considerations plays into that. Yeah, the dependency of one to the other is very important. The success of one relies on the success of the other two. And all three need to be working together in the interest, the gain, if you will, of the other, not at the loss of the other. And policy, as I said, can either help or it can hinder. And I guess the question I raise today is one that appears to be hindering, not to a large degree helping in a way. I say that, but I also applaud what has been put in place. You know, we were fortuitous to have in place the governor's strategic plan for a 10-year set of priorities. That was in place, and thank goodness it was, because it stressed the importance of workforce, probably the issue that unites all of us right now alongside of broadband, in that for workforce is not a question of demand of people, it's a question of supply of people, and it's throughout the state of any type of business. Yeah, we were fortunate to have that in place. The responsibilities of work associated with workforce, the foundational features that were dependent on innovation and those key investments. And the goals were to increase wages by 10%, to increase productivity by 10%, and to increase the flow of people into our state for our workforce purposes of 75,000 new people. But that's because we're going to lose 65,000. When the pandemic hit, the Economic Recovery Committee came forward and put forth a plan consistent with the strategic plan. And yes, we just saw recently where the governor's proposal to spend the $1 billion of the economic recovery, of the American Rescue Plan really followed suit. So there is a pathway forward. There is a set of priorities through which we should be looking through those lens at every issue that comes before the legislature, because we know that that is a path forward. We know that that was a result of people working together to come up with a plan. Yeah, I guess I remember also a former speaker saying to me when I was concerned about the number of bills, not unlike this session, the speaker said to me, Dana, don't judge the success of a legislative session by the number of bills proposed. Judge it by the number of bills that are passed. Yeah, that's very true. But I would also say, as we've learned here today, that for an economy to succeed, to be successful, to grow, to prosper, you know that it's going to require investment. And investment, as we heard Peter DelGreco say, was dependent upon both the message, but also the measure itself. Yeah, we're not quite sure what the future holds. We do know that we have time. We do know that the special session is not over. But this much we also know, that the bills that were discussed today will not encourage investment. They will not help us grow the economy to add jobs or meet the goals of the strategic plan. And they certainly will not strike that important balance between the employee, and the economy. But with the time left, if we do listen to each other, if we learn from one another, if we work together, then anything is possible. That is the message that I leave you with today, to be sure that you speak out and speak up to your legislator if there are issues that we discussed or more that you want to know, so that we can help you be informed, so that you can help your legislature do what you want them or hope they will do. And also remember, above all else, that effective coordination of efforts is always the key to success. John, I thank you for being with us. It's always a pleasure.
It is a pleasure to be here. Absolutely, Dana. And thank you very much for asking me today. And I'm looking forward to talking with you on Thursday.
Same here, my friend. Take care. And to all of you, as we always say, be kind to yourself and be kind to one another. And I hope to see you right back here next Tuesday at this very same time. In the meantime, have a wonderful week. Thank you.